All right, so the mushroom cloud that you're seeing behind me here is foreshadowing. This is World War III. This is what it's going to look like. This detonation happened just a few hours ago in the western part of Ukraine. This is an ammunition depot that was taken out possibly by a Shahed drone by the Russians, maybe a Caliber, maybe a Kinzhal. I don't really know. Regardless, it's a big explosion and it's foreshadowing, I do believe. I think we're going to see this, but non-conventional, the way things are going, because according to some sources, they're speculating that the Ukrainians might actually try to invade along the eastern Russian front. Okay, we're talking about Bryansk, Belgorod, Kursk. We're talking about a replay of World War II all over again. The Germans are going to be sending $3 billion worth of weapons, an additional $3 billion. Okay, we have F-22 Raptors going to the Baltic states, who've completely altered their strategy from last year. Last year they had a strategy that if the Russians invaded, they would kind of just let them invade and then NATO would come to the rescue afterwards. Now they're forming this defensive line. You got troops doing exercises along the Suwalki Gap, 3,000 NATO troops currently training along the Suwalki Gap that connects Belarus to Kaliningrad. You got HIMARS on the Kaliningrad border. You have Poland, who's doing a massive military buildup just in general. You have them renaming the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad in a Polish name, of course, foreshadowing perhaps. Finland just became a part of NATO. That border is starting to become heavily militarized. They're putting in fencing and the whole 9 yards. You have Moscow, who of course is continuously rolling out more aerial defense systems. They even have a drone task force designated for resisting drones now with electromagnetic guns. And this is turning into this is World War III. If the Ukrainians' counteroffensive, which it appears as though it has actually begun, we're going to talk about dissension in the ranks on the Bakhmut front. We're going to talk about the incursions into Russian airspace today, taking out of a few Russian planes, 2 warplanes, 2 helicopters, which is fairly substantial for one day in a war like this. They don't know if that's friendly fire or if it was the Ukrainians. You have the Ukrainians using their long-range missiles now, going deeper into Russian territory in Luhansk, possibly even targeting places in the Russian Federation. And that means that this is getting very, very close. We're just one incident away. And I know I keep saying that, but you have to understand that it appears as though these levels of gradation, that the bar keeps getting moved in terms of the red lines. But eventually there's going to be that one time where we lose the game of Russian roulette. And what's likely going to happen is it might not be a nuclear demonstration first. It's likely going to be Russia taking out a spy plane, taking out a NATO base, taking out a UK asset, some training center, just to send a message, and then the ball is in our court. What we will likely do, if you believe David Petraeus, is we'll do an all-out attack on Russian forces in the eastern part of Ukraine that they currently occupy, and that's when it's on. Okay, so this is foreshadowing. This only ends one way, okay, because Putin has an arrest warrant out from the International Criminal Court, not recognized by the United States. It doesn't matter. It's recognized by enough countries around the world that it's very likely that in his lifetime he's never going to be able to safely go anywhere outside his borders again, unless it's to one of his closely allied states. Okay, so that means that this either ends with Putin gone, meaning that his place will be taken by somebody who is far more aggressive, and almost everyone, it seems, that's surrounding this guy is calling on him to be more aggressive in his approach. Now, the reason why the Russians are doing what they're doing, according to some military strategists, is they are putting on a defensive front because they don't have to expend as much manpower. They're inviting the Ukrainians to attack their defensive lines because typically in war, there's a 3-to-1 advantage for the defenders, meaning that if you have an army of 1,000 and you want to do an offensive, if the other guy has about 350 troops, they're at parity because, of course, you lose more when you're doing an offensive. Okay, so the idea is that if the Russians can invite the Ukrainians to do an offensive, that the attritional rate for them is going to be much higher, because the Ukrainians are relying pretty much solely right now on Western aid. There's the theory that they can burn out and exhaust the Ukrainian military, and then once that's done, the Russians can go do their offensive, take Odessa, possibly take Kiev, take right up to the part of the Western country that doesn't get annexed by Poland, and that's going to be the end of the game, basically. And they're going to sustain fewer losses as a result of that. That's one theory of how this is going to play out. Now, it depends, though, on if Ukraine knows that's the strategy, then that really leaves them with fewer choices. Now they have the Storm Shadow missiles. They're going to start targeting the Kerch Bridge. Yes, the Russians have good air defense, but they could foreseeably overwhelm those defenses, sneak 2 or 3 missiles by, take out the Kerch Bridge, and that's when the real massive counteroffensive begins, because, of course, time is at the essence of that point, because that forms a supply chain bottleneck for the Russians. Anyways, guys, the shit's hitting the fan, okay? Things are falling apart on the Bakhmut front, depending on who you believe. I'm not there. Lots of people who are doing this technical analysis are not there either. You have Prigozhin, the private contractor, mercenary, who's loyal to Russia, right now appears to be exhibiting a lot of dissension in the ranks. We might even see some kind of coup. We might see a turncoat situation where he just, decides to jump ship and go and work for the Ukrainians. I can't see how that's going to happen at this point, because he's taken so many of their lives. I don't think they're ever going to be open to anything like that, but you just never know at this point in time. Is it all theater? Apparently he's going to be relieved by the Chechens soon, by Kadyrov and his Chechens. I don't think Kadyrov is going to go there and fight, but the Chechens are going to relieve them, the Russian Defense Ministry, and this makes perfect sense that you want to burn through your private mercenaries first, because, of course, there's less liability there. They can be designated a terrorist organization. The Russian Defense Ministry doesn't necessarily have to take that on, so they don't have to deal with the United States even more than they currently are. But you also get to burn through all of your convicts, because that's what the Wagner Group is going through right now. They're throwing all of their old convicts from all of their high security, maximum security prisons. They're giving them an ultimatum. You can serve life in prison for the crime that you did, whatever heinous crime you committed, or you can go into this meat grinder, most likely die in the first few hours or days. If you live, then, you get your freedom. So, I'm sure you have a lot of guys trying to go AWOL. Many have dissented from the ranks already, and they've been caught either by the Ukrainians, they've been sent back, they've been tortured, this, that, and whatever. We all know the story, at least most of us anyways, but the shit's hitting the fan. This could be the start of the counteroffensive. We've seen a massive just military activity all throughout the front lines, and if this is true, as Igor Gherkin says, we're going to show you what he has to say. He thinks that the Ukrainians are actually going to try to pull a weird chess move here and actually invade Russia. Imagine how much of a gamble that is. Nothing says existential threat to the Russians like invading their country and actually taking territory. It's only a matter of time before they utilize non-conventional weapons. When they utilize the nuke, where is it going to be? Is it going to be demonstrative? Are they going to use it on Ukraine? Is it going to be in some isolated military base? A perhaps low yield, low radiation, because these things nowadays can be very low in their radioactivity, almost very little to no fallout in some cases, as far as I know. You do an airburst, you do it the right way, you get the EMP effects, you knock out the Ukrainian power grid. This is where it's going. I mean, we are destined to either see the collapse of the Russian Empire or the collapse of Ukraine, and it doesn't appear as though at this point in time that the West is willing to let this go, because it appears that they are really preparing for a full-on war with Russia. I mean, that should be obvious when you see what's happening on the Finnish border, when you see what's happening in the Baltic states border with Russia setting up all these air defense systems in and around that region, when you see what's happening in Kaliningrad, in the North Sea, in the Baltic Sea, in the Black Sea. Who knows what's going to happen with Turkey if Erdogan goes? Is there going to be a more pro-Western leader that emerges in Turkey and opens up the what do they call it there? Not the peninsula, I forget the term. they're going to open up the waterway so that NATO can get ships into the Black Sea. And then what happens? Okay, so the shit's royally hitting the fan right now. Before I go into depth about this, I want to let you guys know, though, about my buddy Steve, who has one of the largest freeze-dry companies in the United States. He works for the DOD, making, large food orders for, the Navy and these guys who have to go out to sea for long periods of time. And it's all freeze-dried. They prefer freeze-dried because it lasts a lot longer. Now, of course, they also supply their bunkers. He has some VIP customers. In recent years, they've made it available to civilians. And he recently got a military contract for whole ribeye steaks, freeze-dried Black Angus steaks. Now, this is the only freeze-dried company that actually makes full steaks, like large pieces of stuff, because freeze-drying is such an energy-intensive process. To make the food last for 30 years, they have to extract all the moisture out, and usually you can only do it if you're doing it in how it's been traditionally done. You have to do small pieces of meat, small pieces of food. Otherwise, it takes just exorbitant amounts of energy. They found a way to do full lobster steaks, the whole 9 yards, the only company that does that. And when they place an order with the government, because the government gets like special contracts with various agricultural corporations, they get discounted rates on bovine, on various meat products. And so what Steve does is he'll place a larger order so that he can, whatever he doesn't use with the government order, they can actually, for whatever the government's using it for, filling up bunkers, who knows at this point in time. Whatever they don't use, they can sell to the civilian population. So currently there's a pre-sale on whole ribeye steaks. You can use coupon code Prepper Steak. Every time we promote this guy's stuff, it runs out really, really fast. And I would strongly encourage people, if you can get freeze-dried meat, that's going to be worth more than gold. Imagine, this isn't actually the ribeye steak. This is a New York dried strip steak. But could you imagine 20 years from now, after the smoke clears, eating steak while everybody else is eating cockroaches and rats? And if you guys haven't seen our video today that we released earlier with Dr. Brian Keating, probably one of our most erudite conversations to date. We talk all about the human predicament, existential issues, extinction level events. He's a world-renowned cosmologist. He's been given a platform to speak. People the likes of Jordan Peterson, Lex Friedman. I think he has 3.2 million views with Lex Friedman. Very, very notable figures. Eric Weinstein, all these guys, okay? Joe Rogan, possibly, Neil Tyson, the whole 9 yards. So he's got a lot of interesting things to say. And I'm trying to be a bridge, not a barrier. I'm trying to bring people into the preparedness community and create that conversation between the intelligentsia of this caliber and just the average layman person. I want to be that bridge. I have a bit of a post-secondary education. I can kind of do that. Once people like this, of this caliber, are taking notice of what is going on in our world on this level and are preparing for things, that I can tell you right now with 110% certainty that any person with any cash millionaires, any billionaires definitely, are preparing for shit to hit the fan, okay, because they can afford to do so. But just because you're not a millionaire doesn't mean you can't prepare. We do gardening videos, we do the whole 9 yards. Go and check out this very thought-provoking video. It's the first in a series of videos we're going to be releasing with Brian. Anyways, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about what Igor Girkin says. Now, Igor Girkin was a commander of the Russian military, but he is now in jail, I believe, because he's the one that they pinned the Malaysia flight MH17 takedown on, which killed 298 people. Was shot down over a separatist-held territory in eastern Ukraine in 2014, okay? But he predicts that Ukraine is actually going to invade Russia and capture territory from Putin. That's what he's saying. He's been very hawkish in this war. He's advising Putin from his jail cell, I presume, that he needs to mobilize the entire population, okay? They need to do a full-scale mobilization, and that they need to be, that they're being way too soft in their approach in the war. He doesn't agree with this whole attritional defensive strategy that, what's his name, Surovkin, General Surovkin, the current general who's overseeing part of the operations in Ukraine, not Gerasimov. What is his nickname? General Armageddon, Surovkin. He doesn't agree with that approach, this defensive approach, because of course the Ukrainians have been targeting Russia's infrastructure every single day, hitting, oil refineries, gas pipelines, and it's starting to probably take a little bit of a toll, even though, Russia has so much energy that targeting that is kind of a losing battle. You'd probably want to go somewhere where there's a smaller bottleneck as is. But he is saying that distracting strikes can be inflicted on the old border, Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk regions in order to capture several settlements and provoke the Russian Federation armed forces to storm them until they are completely destroyed. Let's see if my predictions come true. Apparently, a lot of his predictions in this conflict have come true up until this point in time. He is, after all, a former Russian commander turned military blogger. So, yeah. It appears as though that's the way this is intensifying. These are some of the aircraft that were shot down today over that region. As far as I know there's been bombers in the sky all day. There's probably all sorts of crap that's happening. By the time I release this video, it'll be out of date. That's kind of the way things are going. Now, this is from Russian state-sponsored media. Now, okay, they are speaking to London directly here. London gave Kiev missiles for strikes on Russian cities, they claim. The Russians are getting very, very explicit in their accusations. You tried to assassinate Vladimir Putin. These things are out of sorts in terms of how Russia has been responding thus far. Now they are explicitly stating that London has given these missiles to Ukraine for the purpose of not only targeting, Russian border cities, but not only annexed territories, I should say, like Crimea and the Kerch Bridge, which of course will be the golden goose, the prize if they can hit that, but actual border regions that are outside of Ukraine. Okay, now this is very, very significant because in line with Russia's nuclear doctrine, one of the criteria that needs to be met is part of their territory needs to be under existential risk of collapse, whatever that means. Now, you can make the argument that it's so vaguely written. As I've always suspected, these nuclear doctrines are just for public consumption. They're going to do what they're going to do. But the question remains, if they get desperate enough, which I don't think they're there yet, they're taking a lot of losses, but I think most importantly, and it depends on who you listen to, who you watch, they still have a large army. Okay, so as long as you have manpower, as long as you have guys who can build bullets, as long as you have the North Koreans working in the far regions of Siberia in bullet factories, for all we know, you can keep the war going. You can, as long as you have a good war chest, which the Russians have. They have no debt, and I wouldn't be surprised if they can weather this storm. The ruble, people are going to start looking at the ruble for investing. They're going to start looking at the ruble because think about it. If the Russians can weather the storm of Western sanctions that they've currently weathered and the ruble still remains viable after that, people are going to be looking at that and they're going to be saying, this is potentially a safe place to put money. Not saying right now, because honestly, right now, anything goes. With this stuff going on with Prigozhin, it's very hard to know exactly if what he's saying is legit, okay? And it's hard to know what's a deep fake because you're starting to get videos like this now where it's just his voice. And he's swearing, he's cursing at the Russian leadership. Is this theater? Is this just to try to beget the Ukrainians, invite them into attack so that they have that defensive advantage? What is the purpose of this? Okay, or is this him just mentally breaking down, as some people have suspected? It's possible. I don't think the Russians would have let this run on as long as they have, though. But then again, the Russians, maybe it's a big country. They got a lot of stuff to manage, okay? But maybe they're not too concerned. Maybe they view this guy as expendable and they're just going to kind of roll it till the wheels fall off, till he loses his mind, and one day he's going to wake up with a bullet somewhere that bullets shouldn't be. It's possible. This guy's a made man. This isn't somebody who I think, is very well connected in Russia. He was basically, the door was opened to him by Putin. Now, Putin, the Wagner Group has a future in Russia because they've been opening all these centers all over the place. So if Prigozhin goes, he's going to be replaced. That doesn't mean the Wagner Group is going to go. But, you know, you could see him be a turncoat. Maybe he'll jump on the other side of the tracks and fight for the Ukrainians. You just never know what's going to happen. Maybe the Ukrainians will capture him. He's apparently close to the front, so there's a possibility that he gets taken out and the Russians blame that on the Ukrainians. Maybe it's a false flag. He did so much stuff could happen right now that it's very difficult to try to put a finger on exactly what's happening at all when we're over here speculating like the armchair generals we are. But I always say, I don't know all the answers. You're never going to see me saying I'm an expert on this, but I'm trying to put the pieces together as best as I possibly can. Zelensky says more important news for the defense of Ukraine may be announced soon. Now, they got long-range missiles. The only thing left, Poland is sending warplanes, but the only thing left really is longer-range missiles, more of what they already have, which wouldn't really be important news, I don't think, which they're already getting from Germany, which is $2.8 billion worth of aid, but it might be warplanes. Okay, it might be F-16s, it might be, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Now, if these UK missiles are already there, and remember, they just announced that a few days ago, many suspect that in order to deploy those weapons, you need, you know, British troops in order to help, or former British troops, British military, British plainclothes mercenaries, whatever the case. You need those troops. So there's speculation there's already troops on the ground. In fact, I'm sure we talked about it a couple months ago. There was speculation that a whole company of, more than a company, like 200 NATO, high-ranking NATO officials were wiped out in Ukraine by a Kinzhal Dagger missile. So, you know, this is World War III, guys. One thing to keep in mind is that in World War II, I don't think they were calling it World War II. They certainly weren't calling it World War I while it was being waged. And you're talking about a war that spanned almost 6 years from start to finish. So we're in year one. We're in year 1.2. And this is possibly just the beginning. And the reason why Russia is holding all of their cards close to their chest and they're not just going on the offensive, wildly on the offensive, is because they're playing a long game. As long as they have the manpower, as long as they have the money and the war chest, they can keep this thing going as long as they need. If they can bleed NATO dry, if the Russians can make it to winter and it's a cold winter, Europe is going to be in turmoil. Right now, the United States, thanks to Twitter's algorithm, is completely at each other's necks. Like, I don't want to say like never before, because, you know, the Civil War was the worst, but we're potentially looking at wild civil unrest in the coming year in the United States, just on all fronts, on every possible dimension of social division. And then you have the debt ceiling issue as well, which may just not be resolved because of all the politicking that is going on. I am not confident that Trump's going to be able to resolve the war in Ukraine. And even Zelensky came out and said, I don't agree with him on many things, just like I don't agree with Putin on many things. But Zelensky came out and said, you know, you didn't end the Ukraine situation when you were president, and that's true. I've always said you didn't end the North Korean situation, but all this bluster, it's all for political. Every single politician in the history, as charismatic and as much as we like him telling off news reporters, that's cool. You got my vote there. But you got to be realistic about these things. Are very, very complicated. This is not something where you just walk away, okay? And then you just let Putin go in there and do whatever he wants. You can't do that. It's a far more complicated state of affairs, because then NATO just needs more bolstering, and the rift between Trump and NATO, wanting NATO to commit more to their militaries and whatnot. So I only see this at this point in time ending in a mushroom cloud of the non-conventional sort, especially now that you have Germany sending all this military aid, and that whole relationship is starting to look weird, really, really weird in light of what we know about history. Okay, I mean, somebody's got to call a spade on this one. You got German Leopard tanks fighting on the front. This is exactly what happened in World War II, almost exactly, with the exception that let's not even go there, because I'm already skirting the line of failure pretty close here. Russians are no longer allowing, now this is from Russian state media, so who knows. Finns complained that they are not allowed to go into Russia anymore for cheap gasoline. Apparently the Finns went into Russia, and maybe some of my Finnish audience can attest to whether or not this is true. Maybe this is just BS. They went there to buy, I can understand the cheap gasoline thing, but cheap groceries, who knows? It's hard to say. Definitely cheap gasoline. If Europe has a cold winter and a very hot summer this year, now if they have a mild winter, mild summer, they might be able to tough it out without total economic collapse. But either way, you've seen the stuff that has happened in France, and that's only the result of raising the retirement age, what is it, to like 65, to what it was here 10 years ago. So it hasn't even started to hit the fan there yet. Europe doesn't even know yet. Israel and Palestine apparently have reached a ceasefire as of making this video. They're pretty good at making ceasefires. If I was confident that any conflict could end in a ceasefire, at least temporarily, it'd be this one, because this one, lights up and it's like seasonal almost. But Ukraine and Russia, not a chance, just because both sides are going to accuse the other of just buying time to build up their forces more. Not a chance. It's not happening. Russia's not quitting until they take Odessa, until they take all of the 4 annexed territories, including Zaporozhye, likely, possibly all the way up to Kiev. I don't think they care to go much past that. They just want that nice buffer zone for their nuclear weapons and their missile defense. Now, look what's going on in Iran. You have U.S. to confront Iran with naval deployments as a result of Tehran seizing multiple foreign oil tankers. And if you think Russia is running out of jets, take a look at this. In the next 7 days, the first Su-35s arrive in Iran. This is one of Russia's most advanced fighters. They still have the Sukhoi, is it 42 and 57 and 75? That's like the 6th gen one that I believe is in the works. The 57 is their most advanced plane, and I believe that's kind of like correct me if I'm wrong, like a Raptor equivalent, but it might be an S-35 equivalent. I'm not sure if it carries bombs or not, but anyways, this just shows that, they're still sending out some of their best equipment to Iran. Now, you could make the argument that, well, yeah, Iran's sending them something they need, Shahed drones, so they're willing to sacrifice that for the Shahed drones. That it appears that the Ukrainians are just shooting those things down left and right. But if it's true that this explosion that we see here, that looks damn near nuclear, which of course it isn't, but that this explosion is the result of just a Shahed drone. If one Shahed drone did this, like some people are speculating, then that's insane. I mean, that's those things are like $20,000 maybe, $10,000. You're talking about taking out $1 billion worth of stuff using one of these Shahed drones. And that's what it is at this point. Ukraine might have these Patriot systems, but if it costs $2 to $3 million for a Patriot missile, and it's intercepting a missile that only costs $500,000, the Russians will shoot those missiles all day and exhaust the Patriot systems. But we really don't know what the Russians are capable of at this point. We really don't know what's going on. All we can say is that this is going to either end in the collapse and balkanization of Russia and some puppet government installed there, which I cannot see happening for the life of me. I just cannot see it happening. It hasn't happened throughout history. It's likely not going to happen now. But there are people who think that it will happen. And there is a huge prize to be gained there. You're talking about trillions of dollars, that the most resources of any country in the world, the least amount of debt, and they do have a lot of manpower. So this nonsense about demographic determinism, that the Russians are losing their population, and that's more so the case for Ukraine and other southern European countries. With the exception of the French, they're the only ones that are getting close to repopulation levels, but everyone else is just like the United States and Canada. We've been at non-replenishment levels for many, many decades now, and it's only going to get worse. So that's what's going on, guys. The shizzy's hitting the fizzy, and take a look at this. Climate and war send nuclear fuel orders surging. The world's second biggest producer of enriched uranium from, you guessed it, Russia. Everybody's buying Russia's nuclear material. Wouldn't that be ironic if the United States bought nuclear material from Russia, made a nuclear bomb, and used that to bomb the Russians? That would be crazy, wouldn't it? Anyways, guys, check out our interview with Brian Keating and get yourself some premium freeze-dried steak, 20% off. Steve is a good guy, man. I mean, he's just a salt-of-the-earth type person. Like all these people I bring on the channel, you know, I only bring somebody on if I have a really good feeling about them. And Steve Syros is one of those people. He runs one of the best companies, in my opinion. He really cares about his customers, and doesn't have to, because he gets all the work from the government, as you can appreciate right now. This is the Bakhmut map. I didn't talk much about this because I don't even know what's going on there. Apparently there's a hill right here, some high ground. The Ukrainians are going to try to do some operational stuff from there, and they plan on pushing this back, but who knows? It's really turning into a World War I situation. Maybe that's what the Russians want, okay? It's hard to say at this point. Anyways, guys, you let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.